Hello and welcome to the Military History Club's Great Battle in 10 Minutes feature. Today I'm talking about the Battle of Quatre Bras that was fought between an Allied army under the Duke of Wellington and a French force under Marshal Ney in what is now Belgium on the 16th of June 1815. It would end in a narrow British victory and set the scene for the seismic Battle of Waterloo 2 days later. The crisis had begun 3 months earlier when Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba, returned to France and re-established himself as emperor. Europe was united in its determination to depose Napoleon by force, and Wellington was soon offered and accepted command of a 114,000-strong polyglot army composed of British, German and Dutch-Belgian troops in the Netherlands. The Allied strategy was for the armies nearest to France, Wellington's and a slightly larger Prussian army of 116,000 under Marshal Blucher, to hold their ground until the Austrians and the Russians had arrived in force. Then, together, they would crush Napoleon once and for all. What Wellington was not expecting was for Napoleon to take the initiative. On the 3rd of May, he met Blucher at Terlemont, 25 miles east of Brussels, to discuss strategy. They agreed to a line of demarcation between their two armies, the Ligny to Maastricht road, with Wellington's to the left and Blucher's to the right. They also agreed, in the event of a French advance, to concentrate their armies on either side of the strategic crossroads at Quatre Bras so they could support each other. As long as they remained in contact, they did not believe they could be defeated. Napoleon's only hope, given the huge array of force against him, was to defeat Wellington and Blucher before the others intervened. To that end, he mustered a 124,000-strong army of the north and prepared to launch it at the junction between the two Allied armies in Belgium, hoping to defeat one before turning on the other. That he almost succeeded was chiefly down to Allied errors, particularly those made by Wellington. The first and most serious error was strategic. So convinced was Wellington that Napoleon would attempt to cut off his retreat from the Channel ports by advancing along the Mons axis that he ignored all the intelligence reaching him in Brussels prior to and during the 15th of June that the main French attack would be against the junction of the two Allied armies in the vicinity of Charleroi. On the 15th itself, repeated messages reached him that the French were attacking the Prussians in force at Charleroi. Only by 10 p.m. on the 15th of June did he finally accept the truth and order his troops to move towards the prearranged concentration point at Nivelles. This was later changed to Quatre Bras. But they would have to wait for daylight to advance, and this was far too late to assist the Prussians, who had to face the main French attack alone at Ligny on the 16th. He acknowledged his error shortly after midnight on the 15th of June, when he remarked to the Duke of Richmond, "Napoleon has humbugged me, by God. He has gained 24 hours on me." "What do you intend doing?" asked Richmond. "I have ordered the army to concentrate at Quatre Bras, but we shall not stop him there, and if so, I must fight him here," said Wellington, placing his thumb on the map on the ridge before the village of Waterloo, on the road between Quatre Bras and Brussels. It's a wonderfully vivid anecdote that, not surprisingly, has been repeated by most chroniclers of the battle, certainly those wishing to exculpate Wellington's potentially disastrous hesitation on the 15th of June. Yet its veracity is doubtful because Wellington had not yet ordered his army to concentrate at Quatre Bras, though he would shortly do so. Wellington rose at 5:30 a.m. on the 16th after little more than 3 hours' sleep, and by 7 was riding south to Quatre Bras, followed by the slower-moving infantry of Picton's 5th Division. He arrived at 10 a.m. and found 2 Netherlands brigades in a defensive position. There was no sign of the French. He then rode over to Saint-Bref to talk to Blucher in person. When he arrived back at Quatre Bras, the battle was underway, and Perponcher's Netherlands division giving ground to Ney's 20,000-strong 2nd Corps with another corps of the same strength in reserve. Napoleon's intention had been for Ney to take the crossroads and then support his attack on the Prussians at Ligny. But Ney's orders from Soult, Napoleon's chief of staff, were less than clear. "The intention of His Majesty," wrote Soult, "is that you attack whatever is before you and after vigorously throwing them back, join us to envelop this corps." Soult's error was a failure to emphasize that the action at Ligny had priority and that Ney should not commit himself to a battle that would prevent him from turning on the Prussians. Even so, Ney could easily have taken Quatre Bras and sent most of his men back to Ligny if he had started his main attack earlier. But he delayed until almost 2 p.m. and, just as he was making progress by capturing the hill and farm at Quatre Bras, the first battalions of Picton's 5th Division arrived to shore up the creaking Netherlanders' defence of the Bossu Wood. It now became a race between Wellington's reinforcements, marching up the road from Brussels in stifling heat, and Ney's increasingly bold attackers. Fortunately, the imperturbable Wellington was on hand to direct the British troops to their defensive positions. Among the first to reach the battlefield were the 42nd Highlanders, who went straight into action and forced the French back. Picton's Brunswick contingent was the next to reach Quatre Bras, and, led by the Duke of Brunswick himself, its cavalry charged the retreating French infantry. But they were swiftly counterattacked and driven back by French chasseurs, who mortally wounded the Duke of Brunswick and caused Wellington to seek refuge in the square of the 92nd Highlanders. 2 regiments of French lancers were the next to charge, and, mistaking them for Brunswickers, the 42nd was caught with its square only half formed. In a matter of minutes, the 42nd lost 3 successive commanding officers to wounds and death. Fortunately, a brigade of the 3rd Division had now arrived, and Wellington at once sent it forward. The brigade commander Hackett ordered his battalions to form squares. But he was overruled by his corps commander, the Prince of Orange, who, seeing no more French cavalry, told Hackett to form his men into line. No sooner had he done so than the brigade was charged by French cuirassiers, heavy cavalry with armoured breastplates, and badly mauled. The superiority of the enemy in cavalry, commented Sergeant Anton, afforded him a decided advantage on the open plain, for our British cavalry and artillery had not yet reached the field. It was left, therefore, to successive battalions of British infantry to hold the ground. Elsewhere, the French were making little headway, and Ney sent infantry columns forward as his last throw of the dice. But they were repulsed by fresh reinforcements from the 1st Division and a gallant charge by the 92nd Highlanders. At around 9 p.m, Ney admitted defeat and withdrew. He had lost slightly fewer troops than Wellington, 4,000 to 4,800, but the real significance of the repulse is that it deprived Napoleon of reinforcements at Ligny that might have turned victory over the Prussians into a rout. The battle at Ligny had begun well for Napoleon, with his massed artillery brigades tearing great holes in the exposed Prussian infantry. If Ney had appeared on the Prussians' right flank as planned, the result would have been a crushing French victory. But he did not appear. In desperation, Napoleon ordered the commander of Ney's uncommitted reserve, General d'Erlon, to march to Ligny with his 20,000 men. D'Erlon duly turned his men around and reached Ligny at around 6 p.m. while the battle was still raging. But he arrived not on the flank of the Prussians, but of the French, causing a momentary panic in Napoleon's army as it assumed they were enemy troops. And d'Erlon's men redirected to the Prussian flank. Ney had countermanded Napoleon's order and recalled d'Erlon to Quatre Bras on pain of court-martial. D'Erlon obeyed, and incredibly, his troops took no part in either battle, thus ensuring that neither engagement ended in a complete victory for Napoleon. Wellington spent the night in the Roi d'Espagne Inn at Genappe, 3 miles north of Quatre Bras, hopeful that Blucher had also held his ground. He had received one gloomy report that the Prussians had suffered severely, but he was not aware of the scale of the Prussian defeat until 6 a.m. on the 17th of June, when a British cavalry patrol returned to Quatre Bras with the unwelcome news. A shocked Wellington exclaimed, "Old Blucher has had a damn good licking and gone back to Wavre, 18 miles. As he has gone back, we must go back too. I suppose in England they will say that we have been licked. I can't help it." A day later, he would fight, and with Prussian help win, the Battle of Waterloo.